Yeah, Cloud Capsule has been in market for a couple months now, so not too long, but really a lot of my content that came from T-minus 365 was about security enablement and kind of some best practice around implementation. And I always map that back to the CIS controls because a good North Star seems like that's where a lot of not just regulated companies are heading, but just the norm as far as having a standard that we really organize around and get a lot of traction also with having better conversations with our customers. Visibility, go do this. So that was the thesis behind Cloud Capsule in the sense of automating that GIS assessment so we can get great purview and visibility into what is, in a sense, compliant with CIS 18 across Microsoft today, but also giving you the evidence that would support that as well too. So
Hi everyone, welcome to the IT Collab. My name is Brandon Barnes, and I have my co-host here,
Nathan Taylor. Good to see you, Brandon.
Nathan. Always good to see you. And obviously, we have a special guest today. His name is Nick Ross, and Nick Ross is the CEO of Cloud Capsule, but he also has a podcast of his own called T-minus 360 or 365.
365, yeah.
365. Okay. I was like, man, I don't know. Hey, it's good to clarify.
Sure.
So Nick, I appreciate you coming on the show today, and I'm gonna be honest, like I haven't heard your show, and that I know Nathan is much more educated in that realm, so I will definitely follow up and listen to it myself because I am interested in this. Nathan, why don't you go ahead and kick it off as far as what we want to talk about today?
Yeah, I'm thrilled to get to talk to Nick today. Nick, you and I've known each other quite a while through various relationships in the channel and worked together at the same company a while. But Nick's YouTube channel is one of the best sources for just information about Microsoft 365, modern workplace. He was the default resource for us for GDAP, for a lot of NCE stuff. Really helped us a lot with.
That was a nightmare.
GDAP was brutal, and also Copilot, and just your stuff is really great, Nick. So I've always appreciated how you've just given back so much to the community, just shared your knowledge. I'd love to chat about that. If you guys aren't tuned into his stuff, you need to go subscribe. His content is great. But I'm more interested in talking about your newer venture in Cloud Capsule. So why don't you give us a high level overview of what that is, and we'll kind of dig into that because I think that'll be a great conversation.
Yeah, absolutely. And thank you guys for having me on. Always good to talk with Nathan. First time speaking with Brandon, but this will be a great conversation. Yeah, Cloud Capsule has been in market for a couple months now, so not too long, but really a lot of my content that came from T-minus 365 was about security enablement and kind of some best practice around implementation. And I always map that back to the CIS controls because that was a good North Star. Seems like that's where a lot of not just regulated companies are heading, but just the norm as far as having a standard that we can really organize around and get a lot of traction also with having better conversations with our customers. So I kind of mapped all of that out, expanded off of the benchmarks from the CIS team, and built kind of more of a self-assessment, an ebook behind it. But in doing so, I actually had around 2,000 people download the self-assessment. So it made me wonder, what else do people want here? And the biggest feedback, and even, ourselves taking that and trying to implement it in our MSP was, well, this is going to take forever, and I don't have enough time to go do this. I don't have enough visibility to go do this. So that was really the thesis behind Cloud Capsule in the sense of automating that general CIS assessment so we can get great purview and visibility into what is, in a sense, compliant with CIS 18 across Microsoft today, but also giving you the evidence that would support that as well too. So some of those main ones, even Control 1 as an example with the asset inventory management, it's really hard to do, especially if you're doing it manually. So providing some tooling there to conform to and providing you the evidence collection of, well, here's all your assets in Microsoft today. for your workstations is a great first start, because that's usually where we have, besides RMM, a great source of truth as well. So today, we primarily are in the assessment realm and doing that again to CIS and Microsoft, but we're looking to keep expanding that, into other vendors and other compliance frameworks here in the future too.
So Nick, give us a high level overview of what the CIS 18 is.
Yeah. So, the CIS 18 Center for Internet Security, and it's really some guidelines there to help with companies looking for, again, I'm, kind of decoding this in the sense of their speak, but it's really a North Star for you to begin to organize around from a cybersecurity practice if you don't fall under regulatory compliance, but you also want to have some direction in, kind of going beyond a checklist. Because I think a checklist will only take you so far, but you don't have a holistic strategy behind it. So you don't know how to prioritize, the things that you go work on. And we all have limited resources to go work on them with the continuous changes in the attack surface, the different variances for us as MSPs in our customer environments. So a lot of that, gets pulled in for you to take a look at this top 18 that they've derived. And it really spans across, various different categories there, but they have what is known as implementation groups as part of that. And those implementation groups give you a sense of priority in the sense of stepping up from 1 to 3 in that regard. So it's a nice progression that you can look at. And for us, like IG1, Implementation Group 1, is a great standard to try to look to achieve no matter what type of business you are. So whether you're an SMB or enterprise or mid-market, no matter if you're compliant to some vertical or anything like that, it's just a great way to begin to track your cybersecurity and get your house in order, really, from kind of best practices there. So that's kind of the high level. I know you've been, following it for a while too, Nathan. I'd love to kind of hear your take on also what you value most about it and what you're seeing with the customers that you talk to and everything like that.
Yeah, I think you and I have been talking about the CIS 18 probably 3 or 4 years. And I think we probably both owe Matt Lee a lot of credit for getting into that, because I think he was the first person to expose me to it. A lot of people know about like the NIST cybersecurity framework, right? It's this set of standards and checklists, and it's a framework to kind of measure your security against the National Institute of Standards cybersecurity framework. It's a really, defensible way to approach your cybersecurity. But I think we really struggled with it in the MSP space, the small business space, because the cybersecurity framework is really designed by security professionals for enterprises. So it's really, how to word it? It's really logical from a security perspective. It's almost designed from a, how do we protect things from a theoretical perspective and apply it to a framework that applies to your business. And if you're a security professional, that works with how you think. You think about detect, respond, prevent, notify, governance. You're thinking from these ideas of like, what's my job and what's the workflow? And then we'll build all the things into those sort of perspectives. Let's have a bunch of detect actions and a bunch of response actions and a bunch of remediation actions. And where it broke down, I think, in the MSP space is it's really hard to approach. How do you do a simple, hey, I got a 15-person company and I want to start walking them through a security framework? The cybersecurity framework's really intimidating. You're like, all right, well, let me explain the difference between this detect and respond. And I got to get through all this theory with you. And the CIS was really attractive because it's kind of 18 domains, but they're laid out in a really logical order. You start with the first 3 are enterprise assets, software assets, and data assets. And I love that approach because it basically says what devices you're protecting, what software are we protecting, what users are you protecting, and what data are we protecting? And I think those are critical questions that in the small business space, sometimes we don't think about. We go, oh yeah, I bought really good antivirus and I have really good MFA and I have the best SOC in history. Great, but do you know all your devices? Because that If you don't know where all your devices are, you don't have that SOC and SIM deployed to them, right? If you don't know where all your data is, you've got the world's greatest, EDR on your server, but all your data is actually in Salesforce and you have no security there. So it starts from that perspective of, hey, let's start with it, identifying all your content, all your devices, all your people, all things we're protecting. And then it goes through, and instead of going straight to like, great, do you have EDR? It gets into like, did you have access control built? Have you thought through access control? Have you thought through admin accounts and password resets? And you work your way through the controls, and it's kind of a matrix of 1 through 18. If you go implementation group 1, it's a subset of the controls, but it goes in order. And a lot of people aren't going to get to 18. 18 is like, are you doing pen testing? Are you testing out your controls? Very few people get that far in the small business space. But if you get through 10 or 12 of the controls and really implement them well for a small business, you're miles ahead of so many people. And it's that pragmatic approach that really drew me to the CIS 18.
Yeah, no, I love that. And I think that's when you go and implement them yourself too, you feel this sense of like, wow, I'm getting really organized. I feel like I'm cleaning up my house and things are starting to become more fluid, in the sense of how I deal with security, because I've got this plan around, like you mentioned, it's like some major buckets there that you're paying attention to that probably have the widest attack surface, right? If you think about, especially in today's remote workforce and hybrid workforce, most people can't answer the question of, do you know that somebody's not accessing corporate data on a personal device? And it's like a 101 type of thing now that we have to consider that, we never used to before when we had firewalls and all of that. So I always feel like as I walk through that, you can kind of cross map to whether we do this today manually or we automate it in some way, or we have a third party tool that does it. But I think one of the biggest things is that I encourage people to look at it at the lens of, kind of a tool agnostic system, so don't try to prioritize with tools. Have a plan in place that you guys can adopt internally as far as a process, and then look at, well, what tool could we put in place here that would help us automate this, or free up some time so we can scale out and things like that. And that's a great way to start evaluating vendors as well too, is because you have a really clear delineation of what do I need, to fulfill this control here, and is this tool going to allow me to scale with it? It just ripples into so many different facets of our operations. And I think ultimately at the end of the day, for MSPs especially, is you can have a better security conversation with your customer because it's devoid of the lexicon of, this heavy security speak, to your point about NIST. And the same thing when we talk about Microsoft. That's what I'm trying to build with Cloud Capsule is how can we, get rid of as much of the, Intune, Defender talk, because nobody knows what that means. But they'll understand, about your device health and, how can we secure this down a little bit further to protect you against, some awareness around the common attacks, again, that we're seeing, and relate them back to other businesses. So it just comes full circle, right? And that's why I wanted to start with CIS, and I think we're always going to have that as our anchor. Cross-mapping makes sense to do to help out with the other frameworks, but where I see creating the biggest ripple in the sense of the larger mission statement that we're going after of really, uplifting security across the community is around getting people to conform to something like CIS. And a lot of MSPs have that gap today of it's just a checklist, or it's very ad hoc. I talk to a lot of people that just do that, and anything's better than nothing, no doubt. But I also think that you're not going to be ready for that incident response type of day, because you don't know where to start work.
Well, and I'm a nerd. Oh, go ahead, Brandon.
Forgive me, Nick. I have a question for you. Mm-hmm. So I'm looking at all your stuff right here while I'm listening to you. So this is great. So I have a question. Like you just said, it's very hard to get most small businesses really to think about CIS controls, or even I worked for the government, for USGS, and I had to go through NIST, and NIST was a nightmare to try and comply with on a yearly basis, to re-review, do all the things. So I found it easy, and I think Microsoft did a great job, so I'm dropping that name, of doing secure score. And so I mean, as MVP, I always considered that, secure score was based off of CIS. What is that system based off of?
I personally like it's probably a combination of,
Right?
the way that
Yeah.
Microsoft's, built their products is like you've got like
Mm-hmm.
different businesses within Microsoft that are coming up with their own controls, if you will, for governance in that way. And they have, the compliance manager, which does cross map to, various
Yeah.
frameworks and things like that as well
Yeah.
too. But I feel like secure score for me always is just like a loose indicator. Like either, you have,
Mhm.
a
But
lot.
it's a great starting point, right?
It is. Yeah,
Right.
it's if I go in there and I see that it's at a 30, you probably haven't touched anything in the tenant yet.
Like at all.
But if and some MSPs live by it religiously, they have dashboards where they get alerted on if it goes below 90. In that sense, because they feel like they're checking the boxes. But I think the other big thing is that those MSPs are also fully first party as much as they can be. So the other gaps that you see is, if you're using a third party tool in lieu of Defender, for EDR, or you're using different email security, you don't want them to conflict. Well, you're not implementing those policies, but you still have protections. So there's kind of this, more of a derivative that we're going to try to look to build, which is that lens of kind of your holistic security stack within there. But it's also been kind of buggy lately, and this is more recent, but there's been a lot of MSPs that have reached out to me like, this is showing this now, and I have, passwords set not to expire as an example, and it's showing that it's not turned on. And it's like, it's Microsoft really hasn't addressed it, but, one of the MSPs that I work with, like I mentioned, he religiously tracks it across his customers, and all of their identity scores went down by 20 points across all of his customers, in one day.
That's pretty common though. I mean, we've been
Yeah.
messed with this for years, and we, obviously, like, our company does a lot of BI reports, and we have BI reports on it. That's a good, a good technical business review of, because the big reason why is they do that. So they'll add a couple new items to it. All of a sudden, your identity score goes down, and then we're trying to track it over time because it fluctuates. And so that's an interesting one to monitor because it changes all the time.
I think that's a great topic in the sense of that conversation with your customers, because we're trying to think that out for when CIS does an upgrade, and you're trying to have this conversation about continuous improvement and maybe selling project work to uplift your security. And then if all of a sudden your score goes from a 90 to a 70, and we have to come back at you and say, well, this changed, like it's a much harder conversation. So you have to have a really good talk track to get back into, and it's back to education at that point, but you manage, that change management, that the attack surface is always changing. There's new threats, there's new features that leave you exposed. So how do we set ourselves up for success there versus, well, I paid you $100,000 to go get me here, and now you're saying that I just went down 20 points in a day? Like, what happened?
Well,
oh man,
you're absolutely right. I mean, that is the great talk I have. I don't just sell a one package security. I'm like, security is always continual, right? Some new thing is going to come out that Microsoft's going to start marking down 20 points because they're seeing that there's issues here, or not just to say I use secure score, but there's other issues that pop up, right? Other firmware in your firewalls. You have other, access to your devices, mobile devices. We had this whole issue with CrowdStrike. I mean, there's always something that pops up. So I believe it's continual for sure.
Yeah, that secure score is a nice piece to run with, but there are bugs, like you said. Like, you want to freak somebody out, go throw an E5 on a business premium tenant. And all those extra features will just drop their score because, like, you've configured none of the extra 400 controls you just got, and it's just crazy.
And if you live outside the Microsoft realm, then it doesn't score that, so you have to start marketing it. Yeah, I get what you're saying. Like, I was always curious as to what it was based off of.
Yeah.
I think it's better than that. Like, I'd say that majority of MSPs that I talk to, if they have a default, it's going to that, of like onboarding and everything else. Yeah. And it's better than nothing. Again, I just think that it's not very strategic, to just go down a list.
Yes.
And especially
Yes.
when that list is like 5 different settings that aren't in order about an anti-phishing policy that you could have just done in one action, that you're going back again. So,
Or the fact that you're missing 5 points on your secure score because you have your calendar sharing permissions differently than Microsoft
Right.
recommends. And you got engineers spending hours going and fixing calendar sharing permissions.
Right.
You're like,
For what?
this is not real security. Now, I mean, could your calendar be used to attack you if you're a high profile organization? Absolutely. But for the average
Right.
small business, like there are much better fish to fry than calendar permissions.
yeah,
So
no doubt. Yeah. And I think,
Yeah.
yeah, it's like how big of a footprint are you creating? And then you're super reactive. It's playing into like the fallacies of legacy MSP. And I think, we try to see that across even the CIS benchmarks or the Scuba CISA assessment of really what are we turning on in here, that is strategic in nature versus like this is going to cause significant disruption, like the SharePoint recommendation for only adding like, limiting domains to what you whitelist. Like we'd all love to be there, but that's unfeasible, right? To think about
yeah,
turning that on in the average organization that you deal with.
yeah,
Um,
Or even some of the device, like when you start getting into device management, all the policies in Intune, like especially like mobile devices, it gets pretty why? I mean, I guess the whole point is, what are you trying to accomplish?
yeah, exactly. And do
yeah,
you understand the threats that you're preventing, by turning those on versus
Yep.
when end users, like more likely effect is when end users get prevented from doing some action and they contact you about it. And then you end up, turning it off because you don't understand it fully or something like that. Like ASR rules is a great example,
Yep.
where that happens a lot.
yeah, yeah. Well, so you've built out this Cloud Capsule product, and I'm a big fan. It quickly and very cost effectively allows you to within minutes go assess a tenant for alignment to CIS controls. Um, I'm curious, Nick, when you started down this role, this product, did you expect that guys like me would so quickly turn this into a sales tool? Because it's an incredible security tool, but in my mind, it's the greatest sales tool I've seen in the MSP space for a long time. So was that a surprise to you?
I think somewhat, yeah. I would be lying if I said no, because I came at this, with the mindset that our product iteration was going to be full on remediation to start. And the biggest market feedback I've gotten from the majority is like, no, we actually care about the assessment more and packaging that up so that we can have better conversations. We can better position ourselves to show a continuous improvement plan with the customers. And certainly the remediation still matters a lot, at
Yes.
the end of the day. But if I can have a better strategic approach to that, and also get ahead of my customers, like you can totally scale out remediation with more FTEs and, just people who already know how to do that work. It's not easy, but it's
Yep.
somewhat of a time and resource constraint versus a sales tool, which is like many hours. Most MSPs I talk to that do security assessments from Microsoft spend about 4 to 6 hours per customer per month to
Yep.
derive that report. And so that is
Yes.
exponentially, large savings in addition
Yes.
to, creating stickiness and creating that value with your customer because you're showing them this data. And a lot of it I love in the sense of, some customers like to do the napkin math, right, of our contract value to the number of tickets that they open per month. And it's like, well, there's actually a lot of things that we're doing that, protecting you. And, you're getting attacked a lot. Huntress really did a great job about that with their executive report that I've seen, where they really just show you kind of a basic little executive summary of this is how many times you were attacked. This is all we looked at. This is what we prevented. And it's just a value, driven conversation
Yeah.
that you can showcase. So to your original question, I was super surprised, that the attraction was so heavy. Because there is a few here and there that I talk to that just want remediation, but 98%, would rather have the assessment and, the packaging layer that we're trying to offer.
And you can automate the remediation, really good scripting, or, a product like a Simian Cloud or an Enforcer. There's other things out there, desired state configuration, Microsoft 365 Lighthouse or CISSP. No, is it
CFP.
Assist? CIPP, yeah. There's a lot of ways to go automate a lot of this stuff, but the reporting and assessment and the quick assessment, and you're absolutely right. It's the ability to do literally a 10-second, 15-second 365 assessment that just is astounding. And I haven't run it on larger orgs. I think it takes a little longer, but we're talking within minutes or an hour or so. I've got a complete run book that I can sit down with the customer and go, hey, let's look at your email config. Let's look at your Defender for 365 phishing and, anti-spam config. Let's go look at your device config, your conditional access config. It's powerful. And I what's interesting to me is, I really liked it and was into it. And then I showed it to some other technicians, and watching these people go, oh my gosh, who built this? This is exactly what I've been wanting. I mean, it's been really fun to see how it lands with other nerds, because it's such a great tool for getting that quick assessment of a tenant and really driving key outcomes. I think that's the other thing about the secure score I don't like.
Yeah.
It's not tied to actual outcomes, whereas the CIS I think really is of there's all these settings, but the reality is you can spend hours on your MDM policies for your iPhones. But the fact you have MDM means you're 90 miles ahead of everybody else. Yeah. How about you go focus on your conditional access policies? Because that actually is going to change your posture. And your tool quickly reveals that of your devices are good, but your identity side is broken. Or you have SharePoint sharing that's just out of control. Just a powerful tool. And I'm being a little bit of a fanboy here, so maybe I should stop talking, but I'm really impressed with how this tool is landing with people and customers, and excited to see where it goes.
No, I really appreciate it. Yeah, we spend a lot of time on the simplicity of the packaging layer, and I think it can get even way better, of what we're trying to do. And, we talked about this briefly the other day, but we're going to come out with this concept of playbooks, that you can have for kind of micro packaging those things up where you need to really focus in on education, enablement, and then delivering, potential project work, or maybe it just falls back into your managed service agreement, but you're kind of learning at the same time. Like token theft, is a great example of something where I've got about 5 recommended policies that will help you try to prevent this, right, from happening in your environment. And we could test and see, if they're in all of your customers, or if, they got some gaps there, and then kind of show you how that maps to CIS, and then move forward on what does the remediation for me look like. So it's just more targeted. I think people can consume that better, even from an education sense, because even CIS still, even its reduced complexity compared to other frameworks is still overwhelming, to think about, which is why you just got to start at one and then keep moving up progressively, and not worry about getting all 18, to your point earlier. So, we've seen a lot of great reception. I'm really excited to get the PDF out, hopefully by next week, that we've been working on. So that's going to be more of a customer-facing executive summary for, again, kind of devoid of the lexicon of Microsoft and security, just kind of where you're at today. And we'll be baking more and more in there, as we keep iterating there too. So, definitely a lot to come. And then, once we get all that ironed out, moving into other vendors. But, for right now, the focus is 100% on Microsoft.
Nick, I've been geeking out looking at your site for Cloud Capsule. I'm going to say I am actually very happy I ran across this. I have a couple of so I become a fanboy as well. So I just have one quick one. I know we're kind of running against time, but my major question is, what made you do this?
I think it comes back to just, that overall mission statement of wanting to uplift security. I've been doing the T-minus 365 channel now for close to 6 or 7 years. It's been a while, and that's been like one video or piece of content a week to try to help educate MSPs and give back. So this is feeling like I'm doing it on a broader scale, kind of taking the applied learnings of that as well too. But I'd love to see, that would be my major fulfillment, within all this, is to see a more wide expansion of adoption around CIS. And I'm working directly with the CIS team on this as well too. So that's been cool.
Is this going to expand into any other, CMMC or anything like that?
We plan to.
Yeah.
So we built it now so that I can cross map to any other framework, for
Beautiful.
that as well too. CMMC certainly is timely. It's also like changing every day. So there's a little bit of tech debt
Right?
Yes.
concerns, right, with that one.
Mhm.
Well, also just like heavier like litigation concerns.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and much more. Man, you're stepping into some deep water where you're going to have
Yeah.
two CMMC experts who completely disagree on how to interpret one of those controls. It's a lot harder to tie in, I think.
Yeah, you probably have to have a lawyer on staff at some point.
Yeah. Well, I don't even know, like the barrier to entry to even run an assessment is there because of,
Yeah.
people wanting to host it and self-host it, which, we're not
Yes.
doing today, right? So,
Well,
Yeah.
yeah. Now that I think of it, it's probably gonna have to be like a GCC high tenant. So you're gonna have to like really figure out how to test that one. But
Yeah.
CIS is a great start, especially for any other business out there. So I just was asking out random question.
we certainly get a lot, with, more really focused regulatory companies in FINRA and HIPAA,
Yeah.
wanting to get that because they get audited frequently, especially more so FINRA. We've been getting a lot more of today.
Hmm.
But they're conforming to CIS. I don't know. Basically, what I've been hearing is, FINRA used to have their own standard, right, for what they would point people to, and now they're pointing people at CIS.
Love that.
As a standard. So that's great. Love to see broader adoption there, especially as, we look at, mid-market and down below. But MSPs are really, really taking whole foothold in CIS as well. And there's people like Matt Lee, to Nathan's point earlier, that are leading the charge on that. And Matt's kind of an advisor to us as well too. So just got some powerful people wanting to see this come to fruition. But it's been exciting so far for sure.
I think it's awesome. I really do. I think it's
Yeah, I'd love
cool.
to see it. I think
Yeah,
there's
me
so
too.
much opportunity to just. I love the CIS. I mean, I expressed that earlier. And I think it fits so well, and I'm thrilled to hear other orgs kind of adopting it, because I think there is a level of like, hey, there's all these certification models, and could we simplify it? And I think we talked about that last podcast, where 2 podcasts ago, where we were talking with Shell about CMMC, that it's looking like it's going to become the federal rule for non-DoD contractors to protect federal data. And I think there's value in that. We don't have to build this 17 times. It's the same stuff. I'm guessing you're also getting some requests for some of the other countries and their standards, right? Like what
GDPR.
Australia has their 8, Central 8, and I know the UK has their own secure computing one, and I'm guessing you'll get pushed to get some of those pretty quickly too.
Well, it's interesting actually, like, there is that request here and there, but many people across the world are using CIS, which has been interesting. We've got probably 40% of our customer base right now is coming from Australia.
Wow.
And that's
Wow.
been pretty crazy to see as well. But
Business trip.
Yeah.
yeah. Yeah, man. I heard from colleagues it's a journey, but yeah, there's certainly been other requests, and I think more so it's been on HIPAA and FINRA than those others, but that'll keep coming, with the more that we do here and broader reach that we get and all that.
That's awesome. Well, we're running out of time here, but it's always great to chat with you. How do people get a hold of you, Nick? I know we've kind of talked about it a bunch, but
I have his channel
share the
right
details.
here. We're gonna share your channel too, Nick.
Yeah, sure. Yeah. Yeah, that's always a good place, to reach out on YouTube channel, like commenting or whatnot. You guys can sign up for Cloud Capsule, cloudcapsule.io, and run a free assessment, see what it's like. And there's, kind of a direct chat in that too, that it's me, as well. And then, those are the 2 main sources there. I am active on LinkedIn, so if you want to connect with me on LinkedIn, that's always great. Post everything that I'm doing on there, including, the weekly videos and things like that. So you can see if there's a video you might be interested in. It's all shifting the channel to a security focus, to align with what I'm doing on the Cloud Capsule side. But, I'm too big of a geek to not do like a couple Copilot videos here and there and stuff like that. So
I
keep
mean,
going
you
out.
do have 20,000 subscribers, which is,
Thanks.
you know, 20,000 more than us. So, I'm sorry, 20,000.8, almost 21. So, you're pretty much our biggest star on right, thus far. Out there.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, that's 6 years in the making. So you guys got time.
Yeah, we're not even a 1 yet, right, Nick?
That's right.
All right. Well, Nick, is there anything else you want to say? Because I think after this, we'll make sure we put your stuff out there. But we're good. We should be good to go. I would love to have you on again. I actually want to take a look at the tool, and then afterwards have you back on so we can actually talk, something else, Copilot. But definitely I could speak more to your tool and go, yeah, this is pretty cool. So that would be my next assignment. And to anyone else out there in our community, don't forget to like, subscribe, and also go subscribe to Nick Ross's channel. It is T-365 at T-365 on YouTube. Don't forget.
Awesome.
Thanks,
Thanks,
everyone.
Nick.
Thanks, Nick.
Awesome. Yeah. Thank you guys.